everyone, this is Professor Benjamin, and the objective of this video is to give you a walkthrough of the expectations of the Dust Bowl assignment. The Dust Bowl assignment can be found in session 6, which is our food session, and the reason that the Dust Bowl assignment is found within the food session is because it directly relates to some of the problems that throughout history that we have both created and have tried to solve through food production. So right now we live in a world where we our food and our laws are kind of promote mass production agriculture, and that's actually what created the Dust Bowl, or what kind of began the issues that relate to the Dust Bowl. Okay, so let's walk through the assignment. So you're going to click on the assignment and the Dust Bowl assignment is going to appear. Just briefly, Turnitin is a new software that we are implementing here at the college. If it is something that you will be required to do, at the top of your paper here, there will be instructions on Turnitin for you. It's a wonderful tool, and if you remember, you've probably already submitted something through Turnitin for me if we are using Turnitin this semester. If not, then just disregard this part of the video. So let's walk through it. The objective of this, known as one of the worst man-made ecological disasters in American history, the Dust Bowl has reshaped agricultural practices in the United States. In this lesson, students will become familiar with the historical events leading up to the Dust Bowl and the consequences of the disaster on environmental policies and farming practices in the U.S. The Dust Bowl is another example of tragedy of the commons. Here are the learning outcomes that we are going to cover by you completing this assignment. And there are also scientific reasoning essential skills that you are using as you are completing this assignment. So what are the directions? Number one, I want you to watch these videos that relate to the Dust Bowl. You're going to want to source those videos in your assignment. And remember, we use proper MLA formatting in this class. Also, make sure that if you are paraphrasing or quoting, you are using in-text citations to show. So according to the video, Environmental Catastrophes, that was included within the assignment, X, Y, and Z happened, okay? If you are quoting an author, then you definitely need to unpack what the author said. So as usual practices is if you are quoting, you give a little introduction as to the quote, and then you give the quote, and then you explain how that quote ties to what you're trying to prove. You don't just include a quote just to include a quote. You need to explain why you've used that quote. Unpack that quote. It's called the quote sandwich. Okay, so after watching the videos, write a one-page single-spaced paper explaining the Dust Bowl, how the Dust Bowl is a tragedy of the commons. Include background information on the Dust Bowl, the short-term gains versus the lack of foresight of the long-term interest of the Great Plains. Also include the technical solutions that have been implemented to solve the issues that arose due to the Dust Bowl. Explain if the technical solutions have solved the commons problem. One source that must be used in your paper is Tragedy of the Commons article by Garrett Hardin that can be found in session 2. So if you have not already, you need to make sure you go back and read that document and incorporate it in. Remember, Garrett Hardin is not using that paper to tell us about, he is, yes, population problem, but this right here, this paper does not deal with tragedy of the commons in terms of population. What it deals with is the fact that we looked for a short-term interest, greed in that case, rather than looking at the long-term interest of the plains. So go back, look at that. The Pasture Scenario is a wonderful scenario that really talks about this. It's another analogy for what's going on in the Dust Bowl. It's not word for word, it's an analogy that shows you exactly what happened in the Dust Bowl. Again, I highly suggest that you look through this rubric before you start writing your paper, because right down here, it tells you that in the introduction, I want you to discuss also how soil is a non-renewable resource. So your introduction in this paper should include background information on the Dust Bowl, It also should include how soil is a non-renewable resource. Once the content, the fertile content has been taken, or the nutrients have been taken out of the soil, it is almost impossible to get that back. We can add nutrients to the soil, but for the most part, what happened during the Dust Bowl was we sucked all the nutrients out of the soil, and then the soil could never really recover until we came in and implemented solutions to that. All right, so I want you to make sure you go through the rubric. A little background information on the Dust Bowl. So the Dust Bowl is a period of time, it's about 10 years from 1930 to 1939-ish, where we kind of really, the soil by that point had been degraded, and then the Dust Bowl happened. So what happened in the years before the Dust Bowl is what created the Dust Bowl to happen. Okay, so really the degrading of the soil started happening in the 1800s when the United States government, through a bunch of different acts, promoted farming out west, which is what forced people to migrate who were poor from the East Coast out to the West in looks of hopefully making money. Okay, through farming. Now, all of these people were not farmers. They were inexperienced farmers, so they didn't know what they were doing. And because they didn't know what they were doing, they kind of abused the soil. They came out west. Areas that were supposed to be cattle raised were now plowed up, and then we planted crops. And then during the World War I, wheat prices increased, and that was the second wave where people said, oh my gosh, let me head out west, or the farmers that were already kind of structured out west decided to dig up the regular crops and start to plant wheat. And wheat really sucks the soil of nutrients. So what happened is people began to plow up all their other plants and really monocrop instead of multiple crops. They decided to plow everything up and just plant wheat. Along with this wheat, the issues with wheat, growing just wheat, a monocrop, came the fact that all of a sudden we had a dry spell and a drought occurred. So there were a lot of issues going on. It wasn't just one issue. There were multiple issues going on. And all of a sudden now there's a drought, they're growing monocrops, and the crops started to fail. And with this came the fact that the soil dried out and there were no nutrients, and we had plowed up all these areas. There was nothing to hold the soil intact. And the Dust Bowl started to happen, meaning winds started to come across the Great Plains. The soil had no nutrient content. It had nothing to hold it down, and the winds blew the soil. And through aeolian transport, these dust storms started to happen. And it really, really created this major catastrophe, this man-made catastrophe, which was the fact that people didn't know how to farm. They were farming one crop only. They dug up their soil, and all the nutrients were sucked out. And then along with the drought, this happened. Now, in about 1939, we saw rains come back into the area, and that, of course, kind of dampened the dust, and it kept the dust kind of intact on the soil. But until that point, over a 10-year period, we really had these dust situations where the dust would come through, it would kill all the cattle, it would get in people's houses, in their lungs, and it created people to just give up on everything. I mean, people left their houses and just moved on. And they just never looked back from it. And that was the Okies, they call them the Okies, the people who migrated because of the Dust Bowl to other locations. They literally just gave up. They said, we can't do this. The soil will never be able to come back from this major issue. Now, so that is the technical solutions, right? Was that brings in the Garrett Hardin. What was the short-term gain? Greed, money, right? And they didn't look at the long-term interest. And this is that pasture scenario. They didn't look at the long-term interests of the entire plains as a whole, they were just looking for that short-term gain, which was quick money, and it just really didn't work out for them. And then Roosevelt at the time tried to put in and implemented technical solutions to solve the commons problem, which was he put into effect the soil conservation services. He also put into effect the Prairie State Forestry Project. So he tried to implement the government solutions, right? Which Hardin talks about, like the national parks, all of that. How are we going to stop people from abusing national parks, right? So think about that in terms of the Dust Bowl, which was Roosevelt tried to have the government take charge because privatization didn't work. So he tried to have the government take charge. And yes, we have not had another Dust Bowl incident. We've had droughts over time. The issue is we still have a monocrop system. Instead of growing wheat now, we grow corn. So technically a Dust Bowl could potentially happen again. So the technical solutions I want you to talk about are what Roosevelt put into office, and then what were the solutions that were put into place at that time, and how did those solutions take hold? Okay, and have they really solved the commons problem? I'm not really sure. Okay, so I hope this video gave you a really good indication of what I want for this assignment. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and I look forward to your papers.